All right, and we are back. This conversation continues even during the break. It's a lot of heated discussions. There's some of them we cannot air on air. But Johnston, you wanted to jump in on this. And there's a question here from Tanto. It says, I pay 23 shillings per unit, yet my next door neighbor pays 14.9 for the same unit.
It's a very simple thing. And let's be very clear. The cost of power, or the price of unit of power, is determined by an institution called EPRA, the former ERC, Energy and Regulatory Commission. They have the mechanism of computing the unit cost, and then that is passed over to an institution called Kenya Power, which then bill me and you on the same basis. Just like, at least we know one thing about ERC, or currently EPRA in the new law, that every 14th, all this newspaper will run a very nice advert of the new prices for our fuel, diesel, kerosene, and petrol. The same thing happens in the power sector. They determine the unit cost. And we need to appreciate one thing, that if you look at your bill, there are components in the bill. And like a fuel, where you just have a unit cost, 1 liter is going to come from 112 to 114, starting 15th, that is the midnight. Power is slightly different because there are various components, and but they are classified as two: what is called fixed and what is variable. Fixed is the charge you pay per unit based on what has been generated and evacuated into the system. And the bit about it is that it is an average figure. It takes care of the person here in Nairobi, the person even in near Olkaria, and the person in Garissa, where they're using possibly a generator. It averages for all of us. The variable is where the debate needs to be. The variable. And when all of us quote Ethiopia, Uganda, Egypt, the issue is, what are the variables in the power bill? For example, as a country, we need to start asking ourselves, why should we pay a water charge in the bill? If the government was to assume that charge, it may be as small as 0.05 cents in the bill. Why are we paying for it? Warma, the water authority, is a government institution, 100% owned by the government. Why should I be paying for the water? The government should cover that bill. Why should I pay for rural electrification? The government needs to remove that from the bill. Who said power is an end to it? Power is a factor of production. Why is VAT a component in the power bill? It should not be the case. It is very simple mathematics. We are here. You are using power to produce this product, which is consumed by the viewers out there. Why are we paying VAT in it? It is time we remove it.
Then, speaking of mathematics, then Kenya's government, our government, says that the solution to high power prices is to increase the supply. But is that a viable, long-lasting solution?
No. That is a misnomer. We need to deal with the current situation. All these called variables, can they all be removed? Yeah. And then let's see what is the cost of power. What's the cost of power?
Let's bring in Sylvester on this. And you had mentioned we need to spur consumption. How do you spur consumption of a product that is already too expensive and out of reach for most people?
Interestingly, Kenya's per capita consumption, that is, on average, we are around 167 kilowatt hours. 2014 statistic, I think. And 2014 to date, I don't think we have grown beyond 200 kilowatt hours per capita. And that means that as much as we are growing capacity, there is no consumption growing at the same rate. Either there is a mismatch. What we need is an integrated planning. Integrated planning so that government programs work in tandem with private sector programs or any other investment within the country should be aligned so that we are moving on the same track. It's like the investment in the capacity is happening much faster and leaving everybody behind. And then whoever is left behind is asked to pay for the advanced programs moving forward. Having said that, I think the energy sector per se so far has performed well, except for the cost. And the cost is a component of economics. I hear my brother saying that we remove VAT, we remove the variables. Fine, they can be removed. But government does not have money. Who is government? It's you and me. We have to give government taxes. We have to give government. Revenue to operate, and it can only come from the services. What needs to be, the question we need to ask ourselves is, are we pricing our electricity competitively? If it is not competitive, then the questions come in. Competitive means what makes us different from Ethiopia? What makes us different from China? What makes us different from Egypt, South Africa? It's because we have embraced technologies that are expensive to us. Is it because we have embraced contracts that are expensive to us? Is it because we have embraced fuels that are expensive to us? Or it's because we are not growing infrastructure, or it's because we are not growing demand? Mm-hmm. Those are the hard questions we need to ask ourselves. But if we zero in and say remove this, somebody will be left with that burden. Mm-hmm. And it's not small money. Somebody will be left with it. What do we do with it? It will be passed on to something else. Either it will come in product cost, it will come in transport cost, it will come in any other cost. It cannot disappear somewhere.
It's very cheap.
It's very cheap. And
what is 300 million to Warma a year given by Kenya Power? They can stay without that money.
But let me finish. Mm-hmm. Let me finish my line of thought. Yes. That the people who are using this electricity, to a larger extent, they are overburdened. Would it make a difference if we spread it out? And we have been thinking around this, actually, let's take, for instance, let's take SGR, for instance. Must it be only the goods going through the SGR that must pay for SGR? If you spread it out on everything in Kenya, what will be the price differential? So that it becomes easier to do business, even through SGR, and also easier to do any other business in Kenya, so that it doesn't feel expensive to use electricity because everybody else is paying. You can transfer this cost to something else. It makes it much easier. So it is not a question of removing it. It's a question of redirecting these taxes spread across more, the wider part of the divide. Okay. And then you get it down.
Then I would, do you agree with that approach?
I agree, but then I would turn around and challenge Kenya Association of Manufacturers and say, don't then push selfishly for corporate incentives, because if you receive, as the commercial sector, incentives, where does the buck get passed on to? And oftentimes, as you said, it gets redistributed somewhere. Why can't we form a cohesive force to say, actually, across the board, commercial or domestic, we need to have lowered prices? Because at the end of the day, the same domestic consumers who cannot afford electricity are the people who you want to buy your commodities. Exactly. And if their earning power is daily diminished because of the rising cost of electricity, then you have a problem. You have no one to sell your goods to, even if you have cheaper energy. That said, I know the uptake is still low and the commercial sector is struggling. About EPRA, I wanted to say something also about EPRA. EPRA has not been a body that operates in the interests of consumers. EPRA doesn't sit and set its tariffs based on what it thinks is most fair. There's Ministry of Energy involved. There's a whole bunch of bodies involved. By the time EPRA is coming up with its tariff structure, they have had discussions. So you cannot blame them in isolation. Yes, I hold them responsible, but you cannot say they're the only ones coming up. There are so many exigencies and interests and actors in play, including the same Kenya Power. And even if you look at the same EPRA, they bungled the least cost power development plan so badly that it's been taken down. It'll come back online eventually. And you see that they are allowing 100 megawatts to be sold by Lake Turkana Wind Power last year, and then 200 this year. So they're actually the same ones who are engaged in driving the cost of energy up. And when you come to Kenya Power, I do not absolve them. The abysmal customer care, the meter tampering, the faulty equipment. In fact, today I sit here in honor and memory of an 8-year-old boy who was electrocuted by an earth wire. And what I remember is that earth wires are not live. And this was a live earth wire. We're talking about faulty equipment. He died. We're talking about breast milk being spoiled, food being spoiled. When you bring it down to the granular level of how it impacts and affects Kenyans, then you really know that there's a problem. And we don't need to speak at 30,000 feet above the air and talk about technical things and what and this, because most people do not understand. Even before I deeply got into this, I would also say, well, I'm not 100% clear. So it doesn't even matter how well educated you are. If you're not from this sector, everything is esoteric, everything is remote, everything is complicated, and you just say, and you pay your bill. So I feel that it's a symbiosis across the board. That's why if you just blame Kenya Power, or just blame EPRA, or just blame Ketraco, or just blame KenGen, or just blame Ministry of Energy, or just blame, it's a wholly unholy alliance of actors, and it boils down to corruption that is sanctioned, and we are dealing with a situation of impunity. And that's why I won't talk much about Petition 59, which is currently in court, because you can't talk about such matters. But this is exactly what we are tackling. We're not just tackling the issue of what's happening to the domestic consumer. We're looking at the subterranean deals that happen and the unprocedural ways in which some of these PPAs are granted. Not all of them, but quite a majority of them. These are the ones that are costing us money, including the AMU Power.
Ladies and gentlemen, we cannot have this conversation without discussing other sources of energy. Even one of the audiences has asked, is nuclear power an option, an alternative? So then my question is, Johnson, do we have enough tabled investment in geothermal, in wind, in solar, and can Kenya handle nuclear energy?
In fact, there's also another one on Lamu. In fact, the spokesperson, Colonel Cyrus Oguna, spoke about it and said this is what he had to say about the Lamu coal plant. Listen to this and then we'll talk about the alternatives.
Plant is completed and able to run, the cost of electricity would actually be 7.2 US cents per kilowatt hour. Now the cost of these others is about 8.6. So essentially, coal plant would be able to generate cheaper energy or cheaper power compared to these others, and that's why it was considered to be a very, very important source of energy to be able to power industrial growth requirements.
So he says it will lower the power bill by 7% when it is done. But we have to take a quick break, then I'll come and get your comments on that. I see a lot of you're not very happy with that sentiment, so we'll see whether alternative sources of power is what we really need. But when you come back, we'll also sample some of your views on social media. Keep the hashtag going. It's Daybreak, Citizen TV Kenya, Trevor Mbija, ZK, 22422 is the SMS line. You can still squeeze in a few SMSs before we wind up. We'll see you in just a bit. There's a question that keeps coming up. We're about to get our winding comments from our guests, but this has to come in again. Hillary Kiprono on Twitter says, I have consumed an average of 128 kilowatts per hour in the last 3 months. My rates have moved from 15.8 per kilowatt hour to 23.7 per kilowatt hour. There are no such rates in the tariffs. Kenya Power sends a tariff policy to me instead of rectifying. Say.
So let me try and answer this way. Notwithstanding any meter tampering, third-party vendor cartels, any other shenanigans that happen, but let's look at it purely. If you're on the 100 units and less per month, your tariff is 10 shillings per kilowatt per unit. If you average, as Kiprono is saying, more than 100 units per month, you're at 15 shillings and 80 cents. Now, 10 shillings, 15 shillings and 80 cents. That is just the cost of your electricity, your unit. Then, now you have warmer, fuel cost charge, rural electrification, you have Forex, you have every 6 months inflation adjustment, and you have VAT. So when you do the total at the bottom, that is what he's referring to as almost 23 and something. Yeah. So what he's looking at, he's on the 15 shilling and 80 cents tariff, but you add all of those things. And this is why we are also exploring these esoteric pass-through tariffs. KPLC doesn't care. That's what EPRA came up with. So they just put these pass-through tariffs in our bill and you pay VAT at the end. So we need to investigate where the leakage is. So it is not so much that his tariff is 23, but his gross amount that he pays looks like 23, but it's the pass-throughs. But he is at 15 shillings and 80 cents. And the person who is at 10 shillings, per unit will also pay Warma, VAT, fuel cost charge, inflation, all of those things, and then you get this amount. But if you now look at all the other shenanigans that Kenya Power gets into, and vendor cartels, and your tokens missing in action, and you're paying for this and it's not coming, then sometimes that 23 looks like 33, looks like 43, looks like inconvenience, time lost, money lost, headaches, stress, and so on. So Kiprono is on the right track, but he's on the 1580. He just did not factor in the pass-through tariffs.
Direct answer to Kiprono.
I think Cherotich should calculate for us our...
It's a very simple thing. It's there in the formula.
Look, I started by doing my own bills, because in 1 year in an apartment, I spent 276,000 shillings on electricity. I'm not running a factory. I'm not a member of CAM. I don't have any vested. I don't have a bakery or a sweatshop shop or anything, but I paid that much money. So I started saying, what is in this bill of mine? So yes, I understood my bill. And part of what we're doing is say, understand your bill so that you can begin to see where the shady pass-throughs are, where the issues are, and your bones of contention.
And there are several court cases here, so
so I will not subsidize anything at the moment.
We were talking about alternative sources of power, and there's the proposal to have nuclear power, and then there's the Lamu coal plant. What works? Is it?
An investment into all these alternatives, the geothermal, the wind, and solar.
Is that what we need?
There is something I call the vision carriers of this country. And vision carriers of this country, if you were a vision carrier for this country, you would be looking at Kenya beyond 2030, Vision 2030. You would be looking at Kenya beyond 2050, middle income economy, and the vision carriers factored in every other resource that we have currently exploited, geothermal exploited, hydro exploited, wind, solar, all that exploited. And then there's like, what next? Lamu coal, nuclear, comes into what next after all this. So the question we should be asking ourselves, should Lamu coal come in now? What will be the impact? For sure, under the current circumstances, we are talking of excess capacity, idle capacity not being dispatched, not being consumed, and then you bring in Lamu coal, we can bet it will not bring the cost down. It will only add to the burden of paying for idle capacity.
So we shouldn't be considering those at this point.
Yeah, it should be.
Let's consume what we have first.
Let's exhaust. Actually get
Never mind that coal is dirty, unsustainable, and even the clean coal technology that some people are referring to is not written into the plan for the Amu coal plant. Never mind the environmental and cultural and social impact of our coal plant there. And I also know that, for example, in the US, since 2010, 289 coal plants have been shut down. Under Trump alone, 50 coal plants have been shut down. Coal is not the way to go. This is yet another form of rent seeking. It is one of the IPPs that we talk about, saying they were just there so that they can get their 37 billion shillings every year for the next 25 years, whether they produce the coal or not. As far as nuclear goes, isn't solar free? Isn't wind free? Not the technology to take it down and send it, but we have an abundance of wind, we have an abundance of solar, our geothermal capacities are incredible. What do we need nuclear for? Can we exploit all of that first and say we have exhausted it before we say now? But as far as I'm concerned, the Nuclear Energy Board, I see they were doing some logo competitioning or something or other, or I saw on social media the other day. This is just another way to eat money.
So Johnson, picking it up from there, the $1 million question here is there enough investment going into that, the geothermal, the wind, the solar, which we have the natural capability of?
The beauty of the time we live in is that the aspect of renewable energy, clean energy, is here with us. You know, we used to talk, just like they say, the youth are the leaders of tomorrow. As we speak right now, renewable energy is our space.
So is the government putting enough investment?
Exactly. For example, let's take solar. Garissa is the first case of commercial solar power production. 50 megawatts. That's supposed to power way beyond Garissa. And the reason is very simple. Putting a transmission line to Garissa will take billions of shillings. How about that as an alternative? As we speak, the government with the World Bank has a project called COSAP, Kenya Off-Grid and Solar Program, where now, as Makaka said, we are going into off-grid systems. We do not need to now build a transmission line to take power. We actually just need to do a generation point and distribute within that region. It is as simple as that. Wind is with us now. Like Turkana is an example. Of course, KenGen has a project on Gong Hill. They want to expand it. We have others who have come on board. Yeah. There are quite a number of IPPs focusing on what is called renewable energy, clean energy.
So why do we need AMU then?
That is a decision that was made not today, quite a number of years, and there are reasons. For example, the deficit of supply in coast region is very huge. And again, as I indicated earlier, because of infrastructural challenges, it may not be resolved tomorrow. So do we stay on that course? AMU is there as a supplement. And let's just be honest with ourselves. Coal does not necessarily mean dirty fuel.
It does.
It does not.
It does.
Europe is still running on coal power.
But just because Europe is running, does that mean that it's clean?
It is clean. It is a question of how do you produce it.
That's not true.
It is a question of how do you produce it.
Even Sylvester is disagreeing with you.
No, no.
The reality is we need power. As he said, we cannot plan for power for tomorrow.
But we have alternatives. It
Unless
doesn't
you're
have to
spinning.
That are also environmentally friendly, which leads me now, Sylvester, to the next question.
Yes.
Cherotish clearly says, in the term that President Donald Trump has been in power, 50 coal mines, right, have been shut down. Right now, if you look at international leaders, they're looking at ways of encouraging more green technology-based solutions, even with this conversation that we're having of climate change. So when it comes to green technology, electrical cars and renewable energy, for some of these countries, it's not science fiction, it's already happening. How long will it take for Kenya to also be part of this, the green technology, the electric cars and the renewable energy as well?
I think in the world of energy, nobody wants to backpedal. I think technology is advancing. And the advancement in the technology world is towards cleaner, renewable energy.
Can Kenya be part of that WhatsApp group?
Kenya must move to that space and start thinking of the energy of tomorrow. Not, people have argued that all the industrialized nations at some stage went through a coal regime.
Yeah.
True, South Africa, name it, Germany, everywhere. They went through a coal regime. But that was then. What is tomorrow's energy? Tomorrow's energy, maybe we may not have technologies for coal in the foreseeable future.
Yeah.
Maybe we may not. So we need to think about tomorrow.
Yeah.
And I saw China already thinking about fission energy.
Yeah.
So we need to think about tomorrow's technologies.
So coal is not the way to
not
go.
yesterday.
All right.
But if it is for a stopgap, I said, a stopgap, I don't think it's the right time for coal, because then it will be another idle capacity added onto the grid.
Yes. All right. Ladies and gentlemen, we have to leave it there, but I know, say you want to sneak in one more sentence.
I want to sneak in one more sentence,
Yes.
and I want to say the things that we're looking for as consumers. We want capacity charges for these IPPs cut by 50%. We want the cost of power to go down by 10%. We want more players in the open tendering system so that we avoid cartels and the corruption that comes with cartels. These are the things we want to see. We want to see more power distributors. We want to see utilities devolved to counties. And finally, as my parting shot to Kenya Power, we want a complete forensic audit. We want to see what has been happening since 1999. If you can tell us, the DCI can tell us that 150 billion is potentially missing, There is something fundamentally wrong with Kenya Power, and it needs to be dealt with. And I can say that Kenya, without the support of Gitson Energy and Mr. James Gitau, who has helped us understand very clearly what is happening in the energy sector today, we would still be fighting about our 15 shillings and 80 cents and our 10 shillings per unit and not understand what is happening. But we need more distributors, we need the price of energy to go down, and we need capacity charges to be cut by 50%. Let's see how many IPPs want to jump in and rent seek when the capacity charges are cut by 50%. But thank you. I really have to thank you for allowing this conversation to happen on your show.
We thank you for being on this table and helping Kenyans understand this whole conversation around the power sector.
Of course, this conversation doesn't end. Heritage Say, active citizen, as she insists, and Sylvester Makaka, energy advisor, Kenya Association of Manufacturers, Johnson Ole Turana, principal, QLand Energy Consultancy. Asante sana for coming in. We have a lot of feedback coming through. Let's try and read them really quick. On Twitter at Citizen TV Kenya, Trevor Mbija at ZinziK, hashtag is Daybreak. Let's put them up and try and read through really fast. Alex Mwaniki says, kindly ask the guest where our crude oil goes to. It is always shipped daily from Turkana to Mombasa for the last 4 years. I have a feeling someone is pocketing the returns. All right.
Still on Twitter, where Cherotich is being shown a lot of love. Alex, you say, I have installed a solar system in my house whose initial installment cost is relatively high but very cheap in the long run. How I wish all Kenyans can do the same, thus forcing KPLC to style up or run bankrupt.
All right, that is another alternative there. Let's see what else you're saying. Boni Mudoni says, I still don't understand why I get punished for surpassing 100 units in 3 months. They removed the standing charges and found a creative way of introducing it again.
Just BT. Interesting handle. It's obvious that Kenya Power does not want alternative sources of electricity. Countries like the US still use coal for energy production.
All right, let's see your SMSs on 22422 is the SMS line you're using. Let us know where you're texting from and your name. You don't leave a name, but you say the lady has valuable information to use in compelling Kenya Power to reduce the tariffs. Turkana wind power is very cheap, but KenGen would rather pay penalties than stop those thermal power generators. And Johnston says that is not correct.
All right, still on SMS, Sir Nixon Buru, you say it's very sad that we have very great minds in the energy sector, yet the end product in terms of electricity is very tormenting. Engineers and scientists should innovate ways of bringing the cost down.
All right, let's see. Still on SMSs 22422, we're trying to put in as much as we can. You don't leave a name. You say, I insist on opening up the market to other private providers to encourage competition, which will improve customer care and bring about innovation.
All right. Still on our SMS line 22422, Eunice, you're watching from Mombasa. Good morning to you. You say, how can we say power is affordable while KPLC are making it hard for customers? I applied for power in Marakwet for household use and they gave a quotation of 720,000. Is this viable? I resorted to buying a solar panel. Power cost is still a dream in this country.
Oh, wow. Let's see the last one here, just so we wind up. You don't leave a name as well. You say, how can we spur consumption when the process of application and installation for new power connection is riddled with corruption and unwarranted charges like new consumer bearing cost of new transformer if one is not within 600 meters of the nearest existing transformer? Cost of new transformer should be responsibility of the Kenya Power, period. All right. Yeah, and the panelists agree that that is correct, that the cost of the new powers should be borne by KPLC, the transformers. It was supposed to be 15,000.
But no, people are quoted nothing less than 75,000.
Yeah.
Still today.
And there's a lady who's quoted at 720,000 because of the distance.
So there's a disconnect between what State House is saying about what energy should be happening and the Big Four and manufacturing and the reality on the ground, because the juggernaut and the inertia of corruption in the sector is unstoppable.
I will not put it down to corruption and inertia. I would simply put it to cost of installation.
Cost of installation.
And if the government wants power at 15,000, it can provide.
Ladies and gentlemen, really love for this conversation to continue, but we